Okay, printed book. So I want to show you how to stitch the zigzag book. And what I've got here is the first two sections already sewn in. So remember, this is a two-section binding. So even though there's only what looks like one row of stitching, you're actually sewing in and out of two sections at one time to attach them to the cover. So remember that you punched your sewing stations opposite one another. So the remaining sections I have left should each line up with one vertical row of sewing stations. So even though these are punched really close together, remember that you're looking at two rows of sewing stations there, and thus two sections that match up with the different sewing stations. So if you were to look at the first three sewing stations here on the head of the book, and imagine that these were like a triangle, you're going to start in that center point there, inside the gutter of that section. So put it through that sewing station in the section, and then through the corresponding sewing station in the cover. And you want to pull that through until you leave yourself a little tail. And until you get the first few stitches in here, everything is kind of loose and it's hard to kind of hold on to stuff. So one thing I think, just to help you out while you're stitching the first few stitches, if you put a little piece of tape on that tail, that helps keep it from coming off while you're sewing. So then if you look on the outside, you don't ever want to progress down the spine until you've filled in all the holes behind you, like all the stitches behind you. So then I need to go back here and into that first sewing station in the other row and make a straight stitch there. And then you want to put your needle through that same corresponding sewing station in that second section. So, and again, once everything is kind of stitched in place, once you get the first few stitches, then you'll be able to go straight through the section and the cover at one time, and that makes it a lot easier. So now I'm going to fill in a straight stitch on the inside of the section and go through that corresponding hole on the cover. So I've got a small stitch on the outside, a long one in there, and then I need to fill in that missing stitch right here. So I'm going to open up back into that first section, because I'm actually going right back into the very first sewing station that I started in, and that's where I'm going to tie off my tail. So once you get your needle back through that first sewing station, you can take the tape off, and you can see how loose it is. You want to tighten all that up. There shouldn't be any loose stitches on the inside or the outside of your cover or in the sections. So you want to just pull that nice and tight and check on the outside that it's tight, and then you can tie this off with the square knot on the inside. So this is the same knot we've been using for most things this semester, and that will help keep the section from coming off, and you can just trim that. And then now we're just kind of filling in stitches, so I've got to work my way down, and I'm going to go through that next sewing station. And if you can't tell if you're going through the right one, you can always peek like behind the section and make sure that you're going into that right sewing station on the cover. So like I said, I mean, it's kind of it seems like a complicated pattern, but the truth is that you just kind of think logically about where you're going next. You can't move forward until you've filled in all those stitches, and so you just keep working your way down, filling in your blanks. So I'm going to keep going here, filling in a short one, opening it back up, and then on the outside here I've got a missing one, so I'm going to fill that in. And there is a handout on Canvas that shows you the pattern of this if you can't keep track while I'm doing it in the video. So again, I'm just checking to make sure here that I'm coming back through the right sewing station in my section and cover. You want to make sure too, what's really important with this, that you don't pierce the thread. You guys know that that's kind of a cardinal rule when sewing, but for this one, you're going in and out of the same sewing stations multiple times, so it comes up a lot more, and you just need to be careful about that. And remember, you're always like, when you're jumping from one vertical row into the next, that means you're also jumping into a different section. So making sure that you're coming back through the right section is important. Because I've seen books get really crooked and crazy when you're jumping back and forth between the sections. And if you're not careful, everything can get sewn in kind of like at angles. And then of course the book would not function properly. This is a good one. It's a multi-section binding, you know, so you can add 2 sections, you know, at a time, up, you know, as many sections as you want, as long as you're adding them in an even number. And it gives you a lot of pages. So this would be a good one if you want to do a multi-section binding for project 4. So I'm about done here. I want you to see how I tie it off. That's why I'm keeping the video going, and I'll show you how to finish it once I get down to the end here. So there are no skip stitches on the inside here. I've only got one more. I'm going to go ahead and fill that last one in too, and then I'll jump back into the other section to tie it off. So all of those are filled in that section. They're all filled on the outside except for this last one that I'm about to do. And then once you get back inside that last section, there are no stitches that need filled in here. You just put your thread underneath that stitch that's there, put your needle through the loop that you're making, and then pull that knot tight and then trim it. So that's it. That's the zigzag stitch.